There are currently no plans from Sony to make another Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movie. No worries, we could do it ourselves. Before we start, if you enjoy these type of what if videos, I got a few more on the channel. Links will be in the description below. Let's get into it. In Spider-Man No Way Home, Andrew Garfield mentions that there was a period of time where he wasn't pulling his punches in order to cope with the death of Gwen Stacy. After Doctor Strange's spell sends him home, he has to now deal with the consequences of the people he killed. Peter finds himself back home. With the multiverse now a reality, he can't stop thinking to himself how different things would have turned out if he was able to save Gwen the same way he was able to save Tom Holland's MJ. After years of violence, Peter felt like he lost himself and wants to become the Spider-Man he once was. He knows it's going to be a challenge to earn the trust of the people once again, but he's willing to do it. Meanwhile, Vulture got transported into his universe as well, like we saw at the end of Morbius, and he learns the history of this new Spider-Man and sees the opportunity to show the people of New York the monster he really is. Adrian Toomes seeks out Michael Morbius with this opportunity, and he suggests that they both team up. Morbius explains to him that he has to lay low for a while since he's a fugitive, but will keep him updated if anything noteworthy comes up about Spider-Man, and we never see Morbius again in this movie, thankfully. Vulture knows he can't take down Spider-Man alone, and continues to research Peter Parker's past in order to find out how different this one is from the one he faced. He learns of the villains he killed. He sees footage of Spider-Man killing Rhino. Sorry Rhino fans, maybe one day they'll do him justice, just not today. He watches footage of the battles with Electro and Lizard, and stumbles upon some footage depicting sightings of the Venom in San Francisco, and he searches for any mention of the Avengers and sees that they don't exist here, which puts his mind at ease knowing he doesn't have to deal with those costume freaks this time around. Suddenly he receives a text from Morbius requesting to look into the name Kateri de Soronto, who in the comics is Coldheart. Her backstory in the comics is going to be similar here. She will be played by Sally Richardson Whitfield. Vulture does his research and learns she used to work for a federal agency and that her son had died when a building collapsed during Spider-Man's fight with the Rhino. Kateri retired from the agency and maybe stole a few weapons on her way out. She now spends her time online denouncing Spider-Man for the villain he truly is. Vulture sees this as an opportunity to seek someone with the same hatred for Spider-Man, so he decides to seek her out. Meanwhile, Spider-Man has been doing his best to clean up the streets by stopping crime in the most friendly neighborhood Spider-Man way possible. Some civilians still avoid him when they see him, others applaud him, and tell him that the villains deserve to be killed for their crimes. As for Peter Parker, he's been doing his best to clean up his conscience by volunteering at Feast. Throughout the movie we see Peter dealing with nightmares depicting his violent ways. He can't seem to forgive himself. Eventually he meets a girl who also volunteers at Feast. She is none other than MJ herself, who is going to be played by Shailene Woodley, who previously played MJ in Amazing Spider-Man 2, but had her parts cut from the movie. Peter's not going to fall for her until maybe the next movie. In this movie he's going to be pleased to have someone to talk to, but is still going to keep his distance as to protect her and himself. Throughout the movie, MJ will attempt to befriend Peter and try to hang out with him outside of Feast, but Peter will find every excuse to blow her off. Eventually MJ will get curious and will try to find out why Peter is so mysterious. Vulture eventually meets Kateri. At first she will resent his idea of joining forces since she thinks he's part of the problem as well, but as soon as Vulture explains to her that he's not the only Spider-Man he has dealt with, he starts to convince her by telling her that at any moment a different Spider-Man can pop up out of nowhere, and they have to be the ones to eliminate Spider-Man and keep everything in order. Vulture goes on to reveal the identity of Spider-Man. He tells her that Spider-Man is a man named Peter Parker, just like the one in his universe. They begin to devise a plan that involves one of Kateri's friends, who is a hydrologist at her agency, whose name is Morris Bench, who in the comics is Hydro Man. He will be played by Darcy Montgomery, who we all know as Billy from Stranger Things. Morris will join Feast and gain the trust of Peter. Morris will act as a father figure towards Peter since he knows it's someone he's lacked since losing Uncle Ben. Peter and Morris become good friends. Morris often calls Peter and they brainstorm ways to help the city's environment. Peter even starts to share personal stories with him, and eventually Peter starts to regain his confidence and his interest in science again. They begin to discuss prototypes for their ideas. Morris's plan is to sabotage one of these prototypes and make it look like he's involved in a fatal accident so it can break Peter mentally, so that Vulture and Kateri can come in and eliminate him while he's weak. They begin to come up with prototypes to improve the air quality around the city and also ways to eliminate some of the radioactive toxic waste in the water from previous fights between Spider-Man and his villains. They eventually build a prototype for a water generator that once submerged in water can filter out waste and keep the water clean. Morris sees his opportunity once the generator is put in water for testing. He begins to question Peter if it's installed correctly, and Peter reassures him that everything is working fine. Peter goes over just to make sure, and that's when Morris stages an accident and falls into the underwater turbines. Peter tries to react quickly and shoots a web but misses Morris entirely. MJ is in shock to see Peter's abilities and what just happened to Morris, but Peter disregards that and jumps in to save him. To Morris' surprise, this isn't just a stage accident. He's actually caught in the underwater turbines, and he's caught between the radioactive waste that's supposed to be filtered out and the clean water. The combination of the two begin to fuse into his DNA, and before he knows it, he becomes Hydro Man. The monstrous Hydro Man plunges out of the water and begins to destroy everything in his path with rage. Peter, in shock, begins to think to himself, what have I done? He gets MJ to safety and his anxiety begins to kick in, and he flees the scene. Peter Parker, now on top of the Empire State Building, feels like he's losing himself again. The thoughts of what if he could have saved Gwen, the thought of a new threat on the loose all begin to cloud his mind. He now begins to be fueled by rage once again. Vulture and Coldheart are nearby and use this situation as a perfect opportunity to strike. Coldheart now wields two swords that have ice emitting from them. The three begin to throw punches, but are stopped when Hydro Man approaches and sends large waves of water at them. Hydro Man plunges large streams of water in every direction, even at his allies, blaming them for his accident as well. Coldheart decides to take on Hydro Man, while Vulture takes Spider-Man. With the mix between Coldheart and Hydro Man's attacks, they begin to freeze parts of the city. Ice shards and frozen buildings begin to populate New York. Spider-Man and Vulture begin to go at it, trading punches. Spider-Man, now fueled by betrayal and anger, begins to tap into his rage and attacks Vulture with vicious blows. Punch after punch, Peter becomes bloodier and bloodier with either his blood or Vulture's blood. Adrian Toomes enjoys the sight of the vicious Spider-Man he wanted to bring out. Peter begins to have flashbacks to Gwen, his Uncle Ben, and even the other Spider-Man he met in the MCU. He sees a reflection of himself on the nearby ice shards. He sees a reflection full of blood and realizes this isn't who he wants to be. Vulture on the ground taunts him and tells him to kill him and show the people of New York the monster he really is. Spider-Man ignores him and webs him up for the police to pick him up later. Spider-Man turns his attention to Hydro Man. He realizes the more Coldheart attacks him, the more frozen the city will become. He devises a plan to snatch the ice swords from Coldheart and lures Hydro Man near a power grid. He lures Hydro Man close enough to get electrocuted to temporarily stun him, while he blasts him with ice. This causes Hydro Man to revert back to human form. Once back, Morris realizes the monster he became. He apologizes to Peter for deceiving him. Peter webs up Morris and Katari for the police, and that's when he realizes he's starting to feel like himself again. He helps the fire department unfreeze the city and heads home. On his way home, he stops by to check if MJ is okay, and he finally gives her the time of day. Peter isn't sure if he wants to date anyone anytime soon, but he values MJ's friendship and they eventually become good friends. He even takes up therapy to try to come to terms with his emotions. Towards the end of the movie, Peter and MJ take a trip to Ravencroft Institute to visit Harry Osborn. Once face to face, Peter tells Harry that he doesn't forgive him, but he has learned how to live with it. He goes on to tell Harry that he no longer lives in his head. He actually feels bad for the monster Harry has become. Harry starts shouting with rage at Peter and MJ as they exit the Institute. Meanwhile, we see Vulture once again in his cell, but something starts to happen to him. His body starts to glitch uncontrollably, similar to Adriano Tumino, the Vulture who was in the wrong universe and across the Spider-Verse. Then suddenly, a portal opens up and none other than Miguel O'Hara himself steps in and detains Vulture and brings him back to his cell in the MCU. Thankfully, I wouldn't want Vulture's absence in the MCU wasted in the Sonyverse. Well, we reached the end of our fictional movie. If you enjoyed this type of content, I do have other movie related content on the channel as well. What would you want to see in another Amazing Spider-Man movie? Would you actually want another Amazing Spider-Man movie? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.